Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are jumping straight into a really powerful concept, this idea of living a life that is in itself an act of worship.
Exactly. We're going to be looking at some foundational material from Romans chapter 12, and then we're going to see how it plays out in the life of, well, one of the most resilient figures in history,
Yeah.
the prophet Daniel.
And our mission here is to try and strip away some of the abstraction around that word worship.
Right, to see how these ancient principles can actually give you a roadmap for your daily choices, especially when you're feeling that pressure to conform to the culture all around you.
Okay, so let's unpack that right away. We hear this motto a lot in modern church culture, right? Make your entire life become worship. And it sounds great, but if we don't define what that means, it can just feel like, I don't know, spiritual fluff.
Well, the definition really comes straight out of our source text, Romans 12.12. It's this really radical instruction to present your body, your entire self, as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God.
And the text actually calls that our spiritual worship.
It does. And the insight there is that worship shifts. It stops being this one-time, weekly event and becomes a constant 24/7 orientation.
So everything you do, your speech, your work, your private thoughts,
Everything. It's all meant to be offered up as an acceptable sacrifice, on the altar of your life.
that dramatically raises the stakes for like a Monday morning. So if my whole life is the offering, where does the outside world fit into all of this?
Well, that's the very next instruction, and it's non-negotiable. Romans 12.2. Do not be conformed to this world.
Meaning you can't use the world standards as your measuring stick?
Exactly. You can't use a standard that's rooted in, say, self-centeredness or getting what you want right now or chasing status.
The sources really emphasize that the defense against this conformity has to be internal. You can't just, paste good behavior on top of a rotten core. It says we have to be transformed by the renewal of the mind.
That phrase, renewal of the mind, that is the entire engine room of this whole concept.
How do we define that in a practical way, though?
It's all rooted in a fundamental shift in your identity. Think about it in almost legal terms. You move from being a slave of sin, which is a status defined by debt, to being a child of God, a status of inheritance.
And that shift changes your motivation for everything.
Completely. Obedience is no longer this forced duty. It becomes the natural way you express your new status, your devotion to the Father.
So the change is internal, it's driven by identity, and the whole point of it is functional. The text says it's so you can discern God's good, acceptable, and perfect will.
Precisely. And that will becomes the new standard. It's the ultimate litmus test for every single choice you make.
How you respond to criticism, what you watch, how you handle your money.
All of it. And this brings us to the perfect case study for this kind of resistance under pressure. Daniel.
He really gives us the blueprint for living out Romans 12, but centuries before it was even written.
He does. So historically, Daniel is taken captive to Babylon around 605 BC. The geopolitics here are just critical. Judah is this tiny little state caught between two superpowers, Egypt and the very aggressive Babylonian Empire.
And when Babylon conquers them, they don't just take random hostages.
No, the selection criteria were incredibly specific. They took the best and the brightest. The sources say they had to be young, handsome, skillful in wisdom. The goal was total assimilation.
Babylonianization, that's a powerful term.
It is, because it was an attempt at a complete identity replacement. They changed their names, giving them names linked to Babylonian gods. They taught them the language, the literature, the politics of the empire.
They were trying to reprogram them.
To be loyal agents of Babylon. And that sets the stage for Daniel's first huge choice. And assimilation, well, it starts at the dining table. Nebuchadnezzar supplies his own royal food and wine.
Which brings us to Daniel 1.8. This food wasn't just about nourishment, was it? It was a symbol, a tool.
A huge tool of assimilation and status. And then you get this profound moment. Daniel resolved in his heart not to defile himself with the king's food and wine. He actually asks not to be made impure.
So why was this particular food a source of defilement? I mean, this is the best meal a captive could possibly hope for.
It was almost certainly tied to idolatry. The king's food, in that culture, would have been offered to Babylonian idols first, consecrated to them.
So to eat it would be to participate, even silently, in their worship.
A tacit acknowledgement that the gods of Babylon are in charge. For Daniel, this isn't about appetite. It's a fundamental compromise of his spiritual identity.
But let's not forget the power dynamic. He's a captive. The king has absolute life and death control. This kind of resolution isn't just difficult.
It's potentially fatal defiance. It was life-threatening. And it stems from one single motive. He feared God alone.
When the fear of God is number one.
In the fear of circumstances or powerful people, even Nebuchadnezzar, it just loses its ultimate power over your choices.
Before we move on, I want to dig into something here because something really unexpected happens right after he makes this choice.
This is a piece of the story that gets missed so often, but it's crucial. After Daniel makes that resolution, the scripture says in Daniel 1.9 that God had granted Daniel favor and compassion from the chief official.
Wait, so that the response to his incredibly dangerous refusal isn't punishment.
No.
It's grace, unexpected favor.
Yes. The friction he should have faced was immediately softened because God had already intervened through that official. It's a vital connection to make. The active choice of separation of holiness, it often comes before you see God's protective favor.
So resistance isn't always about bracing for disaster.
Sometimes the moment you draw that line in the sand, help has already been arranged on the other side for you.
That changes the whole framing of this. Okay,
Amen.
let's go back to that internal action he resolved in his heart. What does it take to bind your thoughts that firmly to God?
It means Daniel had already decided whose approval mattered. Not the king's, not his peers who were happily conforming. It takes us right back to Romans 12.2, to the renewal of the mind.
So holiness then starts with this internal rejection, this refusal.
It's not about just looking pious. It's about being visibly separate by choosing God, even when it costs you something. And because thoughts always lead to words and actions, God focuses on fixing the mind first.
I think we need a clearer picture of that internal purity. How do you maintain that kind of vigilance every day?
Okay, let's use an analogy. Imagine you get the most expensive, exclusive sneakers you've always wanted, let's say Air Jordans.
Okay.
You would meticulously guard them. You'd walk carefully, you'd avoid crowds, you'd constantly be cleaning them.
That hypervigilance.
Exactly. Spiritual holiness is maintaining that same constant active vigilance over your mind. Because you're in Babylon at work, on social media, you're constantly exposed to contamination.
So we're supposed to use scripture, the word, as a kind of spiritual sanitizer.
To constantly wipe away those evil thoughts before they can embed themselves and grow. If you don't, you just naturally default back to the world standard.
Back to conformity.
And we can't overstate how critical this is. An evil thought, no matter how tiny a little spark of resentment may be, it can cause a catastrophic outcome if the circumstances are right. The mind is where the fire starts.
And Daniel's resolve was the decision to control that ignition chamber. So he's living this separation day in and day out. And if you live in a way that directly counteracts the flow of the entire world around you, what happens?
Friction. Massive systemic resistance.
Yeah.
And that friction, ironically, it becomes your diagnostic tool. It's your spiritual litmus test to know if you're truly living by that renewed standard.
And Daniel's excellence, which God gave him, it didn't protect him from that conflict.
No, it created it. It made him enemies who were desperately searching for a way to accuse him.
Which leads to Daniel 6.4, one of the most powerful descriptions of character in the Bible. They find no ground or fault in him.
He was the kind of person that not a speck of dust came out, even when shaken. That's the quote from the source.
An astonishing level of integrity. They couldn't find anything, not in his work, not his finances, not his reputation.
So they had to attack the one thing he refused to compromise, his worship.
They manufacture a conspiracy. They convince King Darius to make a decree. No praying to anyone except the king for 30 days. And the punishment is the lion's den.
It was an existential threat aimed directly at his spiritual discipline.
But let's just pause on that. If his life was so pure, why did God still allow him to face the lion's den? It seems like holiness doesn't guarantee a smooth path.
It absolutely doesn't. Holiness isn't a shield against friction. It's the preparation you need to survive it. The test of a living sacrifice is often a confrontation with loss or even death.
So the choice for Daniel was his life versus his established pattern of devotion. What was his final response then when he knew that decree was signed?
He went home, he opened the window toward Jerusalem, showing his true loyalty, and he knelt down 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks to his God, just as he had done before.
That little phrase, just as he had done before, that's the pinnacle of life as worship.
It's the ultimate statement. His worship wasn't some desperate, panicked reaction to a crisis.
It was a pre-existing rhythm.
A non-negotiable, daily, everyday worship. It proves that a true worshiper doesn't compromise their holiness just because the cost suddenly went way up.
So the question isn't, will I start worshiping when the crisis hits?
It's, will I continue the rhythm I've already established? And that's how invisible faith is proven by visible, often self-sacrificing action.
As we wrap this up, I want to challenge your perspective on the story. We usually remember Daniel as the man who survived the lion's den. But based on this blueprint from Romans and Daniel chapter 1, maybe he should be remembered first as the holy worshiper whose entire life was an acceptable sacrifice before we even get to the lions.
That's a great point. We are all sent out every day into our own version of Babylon, the workplace, the university, the digital world.
And we face the same kinds of sweet temptations, comfort, status, easy conformity, things that look good but compromise who we are.
And what we learn is that holiness is often just a series of daily no's. No to defilement, no to the culture of self first, and yes to the hard work of guarding your mind.
Which brings us back to that unexpected result. When Daniel chose to resist, the first thing that happened was that God granted him favor.
Exactly. And that's the provocative thought we want to leave you with. When you choose that holy resistance, when you refuse to compromise your identity, what protective favor or unexpected compassion might you find that God has already arranged on your behalf?
So maintaining your separation might not just be about preparing for friction.
It might actually be the very pathway to an unexpected grace.